It started like every other Saturday. The morning haze clung low over Liverpool, damp and grey, the kind of weather that seeped into your bones and made the first pint feel like salvation. It'd been buzzing since dawn, lacing up my battered trainers, throwing on the red scarf I'd worn to 100 matches before. It smelled of stale smoke and lager, of sweat and rain and violence pressed deep into the fibers. A second skin, almost. The lads were already outside the pub when I got there, pint glasses raised, voices hoarse from shouting though the match hadn't even begun. Big Danny slapped me on the back hard enough to rattle my teeth. Marty shoved a pint into my hand before it even reached the door. Same as always. Same faces, same rituals, same drunken joy simmering with something sharper, something that always hovered just beneath. We drank. We sang. We laughed too loud. The street filled with red scarves, with boots thudding on wet pavement, with smoke curling from cheap cigarettes. By the time we started marching toward the ground, the buzz was in full swing, part alcohol, part adrenaline, part that tribal hunger that came only on match day. The stadium loomed ahead, a cathedral of steel and concrete. I'd seen it 1,000 times, but each time it rose like some holy thing, towering over us, swallowing us whole. The chants grew louder as we pushed toward the gates. The air vibrated with drums, voices, the stomp of boots. And yet, something felt wrong. I can't explain it properly. Maybe it was just me, maybe it was nothing. But the voices didn't sound like voices. Not really. They weren't messy or chaotic, not like you'd expect from a mob of half-drunk scousers. They were clean. Too clean. Perfectly timed. Every syllable hit the air at once, like a single throat stretched across thousands of bodies. I shook it off. Too many pints, I told myself. The echo off the stadium walls, maybe. But when I glanced at the lads around me, my stomach twisted. Danny's face looked different. Not much, just enough to make my skin crawl. His jaw sharper, his eyes darker, set too deep. The smile stretched wider than it should, teeth catching in the floodlights. He turned and shouted the chant, and his mouth moved in time with everyone else's, exactly in time. Perfect synchronization. Not a beat off, not a word missed. I laughed it off, forced it down. Just nerves. Just excitement. That's all. Inside, the noise hit like a wall. It always loved that moment. Walking up the steps, the roar of the crowd swelling, the pitch blazing green under the lights. It was the purest high I knew. But tonight, the roar wasn't a roar. It was one note, deep and droning, vibrating in my chest like the hum of machinery. I turned, scanning the stands. Thousands of faces, painted red, scarves waving, fists pumping. But they moved as one. Every gesture mirrored in perfect rhythm. An army of mannequins, each playing their role flawlessly. My mates pressed in around me, jostling, grinning, shouting. But when I looked closer, their faces blurred. For a heartbeat I couldn't tell them apart. Marty's grin slid onto Danny's jaw. Danny's eyes appeared on Reese's face. All of them blending, shifting, like masks swapped too fast for me to catch. I squeezed my eyes shut, rubbed at them until stars burst across the dark. When I opened them, everything looked normal again. The lads laughed, shoved each other, swore at the opposing fans across the divide. Normal. But the chant never wavered. The match started. The whistle blew, the players ran, the ball skidded across the pitch. But I couldn't focus. Every time the crowd erupted, it was the same sound, the same roar, not voices but one endless breath. I stared at the players, trying to ground myself, but even they moved strangely. Too sharp, too quick, like their limbs weren't theirs, like strings pulled them into place. I felt sick. I wanted to leave, but I couldn't. My legs stayed rooted, heavy as stone. The scarf around my neck felt tighter, like hands pressing. I tried to speak, to tell Danny something was wrong, but when I opened my mouth the words that came out weren't mine. They were the chant. The same chant as everyone else. Perfect. In sync. My throat burned with it, yet I couldn't stop. And when I glanced at Danny, he was watching me, not the pitch, not the players, me. His grin stretched impossibly wide, and I realized the others were watching too. All of them. Faces shifting, blending, eyes locked on me. The match went on. The crowd roared. The hymn of voices shook the stadium to its core. And in the middle of it, I understood. This wasn't a match. This was a ritual. And I was inside it. The match should have anchored me. 90 minutes, 2 halves, players charging, tackles flying, a ball crossing a line. That simple. That familiar. But it didn't feel simple tonight. It didn't feel like football at all. The pitch glowed under the floodlights, too bright, like glass stretched tight over something alive beneath. Every blade of grass shimmered, bending in a way grass should bend, like it was breathing. The players' boots sank deeper than they should have, leaving marks that closed up instantly, as if the pitch swallowed each step. The lads kept shouting, but I wasn't hearing them anymore. Not as people. Not as mates. Their voices pressed into me, thick and heavy, like I wasn't standing beside them but inside them, inside a single body, chanting with lungs larger than any human's. At first I thought it was the pints. Or nerves. Or lack of sleep. But then the stands moved. I swear they did. I leaned forward, squinting across the stadium. The whole east stand shifted, just slightly, like a ripple passing through a sheet. The steel beams groaned, the roof dipped, and thousands of bodies swayed together, not like a wave, not like a cheer, but exactly the same movement at exactly the same time. And then they snapped back. Perfectly. Like nothing had happened. My stomach turned. The game went on. Pass, kick, shout. But none of it looked right. The players weren't men anymore, not in the way I understood. Their limbs jerked in stiff bursts, then flowed unnaturally smooth, like puppets on invisible strings. Their faces were blank, wiped clean, mouths opening only to release that same low chant that pulsed from the crowd. I strained to see the ball itself, but it flickered, stretching and shrinking, a sphere 1 second, a blazing shape the next, twisting mid-air in impossible arcs. The crowd screamed in joy when it hit the net, but the scream wasn't a scream. It was a single note, sharp and piercing, shaking the rafters until dust rained down on my hair. My ears rang, my chest ached, but I kept shouting anyway, words I didn't choose, syllables pouring from me in perfect rhythm with the rest. I tried to grab Danny's arm, tried to ground myself. His skin felt wrong, too hot, too tight over muscle that twitched beneath like something caged. He didn't turn to look at me. None of them did. They just kept chanting, eyes fixed on the pitch. I tried again, louder, shouting his name. But when he did glance at me, his eyes were gone. Not closed, not blind, just gone. Black hollows sunk deep into a face stretched wide in that endless grin. I stumbled back, heart hammering. The scarf burned against my neck. The ground trembled beneath my feet. I swore I could hear something moving beneath the pitch, some vast engine or heartbeat, its rhythm syncing with the chants. Thud, thud, thud. The east stand rippled again. This time I saw it clearly. The steel supports bent like ribs, the roof curved like a spine. The stadium wasn't a building, it was a cage. Or worse, a body. And we were inside it. The crowd roared again. The walls shuddered, the ground pulsed. My knees buckled. My breath caught in my throat, my vision swimming. And in that haze, I saw the truth I didn't want to see. The match didn't matter. The goals, the players, the chants, they weren't the point. They were a mask. A cover for something else. Something older. This was a ritual. And the stadium itself was alive. I tried to run. I shoved past Marty, past Reese, past strangers whose faces blurred into shifting masks. But no matter how hard I pushed, I didn't move. My feet pounded, my lungs burned, yet the stairs never came closer. The rows stretched endlessly, looping back on themselves, a spiral swallowing me deeper. I stopped, gasping, dizzy. Around me, the lads hadn't even noticed. They just kept singing, fists pumping, eyes locked on the pitch that wasn't a pitch anymore but a mouth opening wider with every chant. And in that moment of terror, the thought struck me cold. Maybe it'd never been here before. Not really. Not in the way I thought. Maybe all those Saturdays, all those matches, all those chants had just been steps in the same ritual, laps in the same spiral. Maybe it'd been inside this thing all along. I tried to convince myself it was in my head. Too much drink, not enough sleep, nerves fried from years of scraps and running from coppers. I told myself I'd close my eyes, take a deep breath, and when I opened them it would all look normal again. It didn't. When I opened them, the lads weren't the lads anymore. Danny stood closest, shoulders hunched, jaw clenched, that grin carved too wide. His scarf hung loose around his neck, but when it slipped I saw it wasn't fabric at all. It was skin, stretched and patterned red, pulsing with each chant. Marty's head twitched in tiny, mechanical jerks, like a puppet on the end of frayed strings. Reese's mouth never closed, his lips cracked from chanting too long, his teeth gleaming too sharp in the floodlights. And their eyes, God, their eyes. Not eyes, not really. Just hollows. Black pits where something used to be. Yet they still stared. Not at the pitch, not at the players, but at me. The realization hit like a fist. They weren't watching the game at all. They were watching me. I froze. My heart slammed against my ribs. I wanted to shout, to curse, to tell them to stop, but when I opened my mouth the chant came out again. Perfect. Word for word. In rhythm. My throat bled with it, but I couldn't stop. The crowd joined, louder, endless, a wall of noise that pressed into my skull. I covered my ears, but the chant came from inside me, vibrating through bone and blood. My chest heaved, my vision blurred, and still the words kept spilling out. I staggered down the row, shoving bodies aside. Their shoulders were cold, too cold for living flesh. When I looked at their faces, they weren't strangers anymore. Every single one had Danny's grin. Every single one had Marty's twitch. Every single one had Reese's gaping mouth. The whole stand was full of my mates. Copies of them. Or shadows. Or masks. I stumbled back, my legs shaking. It couldn't be real. It couldn't. But when I closed my eyes, the chant rattled on, and when I opened them, the truth only grew worse. The stands swayed again, the steel bending like ribs, the roof curling like lungs. And the crowd inside it pulsed together, breathing, chanting, staring. I looked back to the pitch for escape, for distraction, but the game had stopped. The players stood frozen, motionless, every head tilted up toward the stands. Their faces were smooth now, wiped clean, no eyes, no mouths. Just blank masks turned toward us, waiting. Waiting for what? The whistle blew, though no referee held it. The sound was sharp, splitting, cutting straight through marrow. The crowd screamed back, but it wasn't celebration. It was obedience. A single, perfect note. And I screamed too. I didn't want to. I tried to choke it back, but my mouth stretched wider, my throat tore raw, and the sound poured out. My voice was theirs. My breath was theirs. My body wasn't mine. I clawed at my face, desperate to feel myself, to prove I was still real. My skin felt thin, stretched, damp with sweat that wasn't sweat. My fingertips pressed deeper than they should, like clay softening in heat. I stumbled, panicked, searching for a way out. The stairwells loomed in the distance, twisting, curling, spiraling downward like tunnels into something vast and dark. The exits weren't exits anymore. They were throats. Behind me, the lads moved. Not separately. Together. One step. Another. Every footfall in perfect unison. Their hollows stared into me. Their grins widened. Their mouths opened. And in their chant I heard something new, a word buried deep in the rhythm, a name I didn't recognize but knew belonged to me. They weren't chanting for the players. They weren't chanting for the club. They were chanting for me. At first I thought I was imagining it, a trick of panic, my brain twisting the roar of the cop into something personal. But the longer I listened, the clearer it became. Beneath the endless chorus, buried under the pounding rhythm, there was a word. My name. Dragged out, stretched thin, broken into syllables until it barely sounded human anymore. Over and over, tens of thousands of mouths shaping the same sound. They weren't celebrating a goal. They weren't roaring for the team. They were summoning me. My knees buckled, my stomach clenched. I gripped the railing, knuckles white, trying to steady myself as the chant drilled into my skull. The whole stand moved with it, bodies jerking in unison, arms rising and falling like the limbs of a single, massive beast. The roof above us groaned, the steel shivering with every syllable, dust raining down in gray clouds. I shouted back, stop, or tried to. But the word never left my throat. My mouth stretched, my lungs emptied, and the chant came out instead. My voice betrayed me, fusing with theirs, drowning under the tide. I wasn't shouting my own name. I was part of it. The scarf burned against my neck, tightening like a noose. My chest heaved. I ripped it free, but the fabric clung, stretching longer, twisting like sinew. When I threw it down, it writhed on the concrete, curling back toward my boots like it wanted to climb me again. I kicked it away. It slithered into the shadows beneath the seats, gone. I turned to run, desperate for an exit. The stairwell loomed not far off, but the crowd shifted, closing ranks. Not with fists or shoves like on derby days, but with something worse, synchrony. Thousands of shoulders leaning in at once, thousands of feet stepping sideways in perfect time. A wall of bodies with no gaps, no hesitation, no human messiness. I couldn't push through. Couldn't even touch them. My hands slid off their arms like mist. I shouted again, for Danny, for Marty, for anyone, but when they turned, their faces weren't faces anymore. Not skin and bone, not even hollows now. Just masks, pale and smooth, the kind you'd see in a shop window, painted with faint outlines of expressions. Smiles that didn't move, eyes that didn't see. Yet I knew. They were looking at me. The chanting rose, shaking the seats, rattling my teeth. The pitch below shimmered, the players gone, the grass yawning open like a pit. The floodlights tilted, bending inward, aiming down at the center circle, which glowed brighter and brighter until it wasn't grass anymore but stone, black and wet. Marked with carvings too twisted for words. And I understood. The game had never been real. The stadium was never just concrete and steel. It was a place of gathering, of focus, of power. A temple built of bodies and noise. And now it had chosen me. The realization brought no relief. Only dread. The crowd stepped forward, one mass, one breath, the sound of their feet like thunder rolling through the earth. I stumbled back, closer to the railing, until the pitch opened beneath me, a void sucking in the light. I could feel it calling, the rhythm in my blood, the chant in my lungs. The ritual wasn't complete. Not yet. It needed me. My fingers dug into the railing, but my arms trembled. The steel pulsed like flesh, slippery under my grip. My name echoed, louder, faster, until it wasn't sound anymore but pressure, crushing me from all sides. I screamed, not words, just terror, but the sound bent, broke, twisted, joining the chant anyway. I wasn't outside of it. I was never outside. I was inside from the start. The match, the mates, the chants, they'd led me here step by step, week by week, year by year. Not by accident. By design. And now the stands leaned closer, the roof bent inward, the whole stadium curving like a mouth ready to swallow. And I knew I wasn't a fan. I was the offering. The railing gave way. Not snapped, not broken, opened. It bent in my grip like soft clay, curving outward, pulling me over. I stumbled, arms flailing, and the next thing I knew I was tumbling down the steps, knees slamming concrete, hands tearing open on sharp edges that pulsed like living veins. I should have stopped halfway down. I should have broken something. But the steps kept unfolding, stretching longer than they ever were, twisting downward in a spiral that pulled me closer to the pitch. And the pitch wasn't the pitch anymore. It was a wound. A black circle yawning wide, slick with something that wasn't water, edges raw and glowing. The grass peeled back in strips, curling like old skin, revealing the stone beneath, black, jagged, carved deep with spirals that pulsed like arteries. The crowd roared, their chant crashing like waves, and the stands leaned closer, bending toward me. Tens of thousands of faces above, masks smooth and blank, staring down in perfect silence even as the sound tore from their throats. I tried to climb back up. My palms slipped on wet stone, my legs heavy like lead. The steps twisted, shifting under me, carrying me lower no matter how hard I scrambled upward. My lungs burned, every breath a chant I didn't want to speak but couldn't stop myself from uttering. When I looked up, the lads were there. Danny, Marty, Reese. They hadn't moved from their spot, but somehow they were at the railing above me, peering down with their grins too wide, their faces stretched thin, their hollows boring into me. And they didn't shout encouragement, didn't call my name like before. They whispered. 3 voices only, but they cut sharper than the entire crowd. The words blurred, foreign, old, but my bones understood. They weren't just calling me, they were claiming me. My legs buckled. My body moved without me, carried step by step until I reached the edge of the wound. The circle pulsed like a heart. Heat rose in waves, thick and metallic, coating my tongue with the taste of rust. Below, something shifted. Not a player, not a ball, not anything human. Just movement, massive and slow, turning in the dark. The floodlights tilted inward, their beams slicing across the stone, and I saw shapes carved deep into it. Not letters, not words, faces. Dozens. Hundreds. Staring up, mouths frozen mid-chant, eyes wide in terror. Faces I knew. The lads. The ones I grew up with. The ones I fought alongside, drank with, bled with. Not just the 3 of them, all of them. Everyone I'd ever stood beside on the terraces. They weren't beside me now. They never had been. They'd been here all along, carved into the stone, feeding the circle. And I was next. I screamed. It echoed back wrong, my own voice warped, deepened, multiplied, like the stadium itself was mocking me. I tried to run, but the circle's edge rose like a wave, pulling me in. My feet slipped, my arms clawed at the air, and the crowd's chant hit its peak. The sound wasn't human anymore. It was a siren, a storm, a tearing of the sky. My skull rattled, my heart sank to it, every beat dragging me closer to the edge. I fell. For a heartbeat, silence. Then heat. Pressure. The sensation of being swallowed whole. The dark closed around me, thick and alive, pressing from all sides. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, but still I was falling, deeper and deeper, as the chant followed me into the pit. And for the first time I understood what it was saying. Not my name. Not the club's name. Not words at all. It was hunger. And I was what it wanted. The fall had no bottom. Air whipped past me at first, cold and sharp, then thickened until it felt like I was sinking through tar. My body slowed, suspended, no longer falling but drifting, weightless and heavy at once. My ears popped, my lungs burned, and the chant, always the chant, followed me down. When I finally landed, it wasn't with an impact. It was with absorption. The ground rose to meet me, soft and slick, swallowing my knees, my hands, my chest until I lay half buried in it. Not earth. Not stone. Something else. Flesh, maybe. Or something older that flesh only imitates. The air glowed dim red, pulsing in rhythm with a heartbeat so massive it shook my bones. My eyes adjusted slowly, shapes emerging. Walls curved around me in vast spirals, ridged and veined, dripping with something that hissed when it hit the ground. I wasn't in a room. I wasn't in a tunnel. I was inside the wound. And I wasn't alone. They hung from the walls, bodies, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Some recent, still twitching, mouths open in silent chant. Others shriveled, skin tight as paper, eyes long gone. Scarves knotted around their necks, shirts stained red, faces locked in those same frozen grins. I recognized them. Not just my mates, not just the faces from the stone above. Strangers too. Men I'd seen in pubs, in away days, in headlines. Old hooligans, long dead, missing, forgotten. All of them strung together here, bound into the spiral. Their mouths moved. Their throats rasped. They weren't chanting out of choice. They were instruments. I staggered up, legs shaking, trying not to look at them. But their heads all turned in perfect unison, following me. Every hollow gaze locked on mine. The chant grew louder. Not with sound. With weight. It pressed on my chest, bent my spine, forced my head down. I tried to resist, but my knees buckled, slamming into the slick ground. My mouth opened. The words came out again, alien syllables that tasted of iron and ash. I couldn't stop. The walls pulsed. The ground throbbed. Something stirred deeper in the dark, its mass shifting like continents turning in sleep. I felt it before I saw it, the weight of it, the hunger of it, pulling me closer. The pit yawned ahead, wider now, a spiral stair of flesh leading downward. Shapes moved along the edges, shadows that weren't shadows, tall and thin, limbs too many, faces shifting with every blink. They walked the spiral slowly, patiently, herding me downward without a word. And I walked. Because I had no choice. Every step sank into the flesh, leaving prints that closed up instantly, swallowing any trace of me. The chant roared inside my skull, filling every corner of thought, drowning memory, smothering self. My name meant nothing now. My past meant nothing. I was only movement. Only obedience. The deeper I went, the more the air burned. My skin prickled, my muscles ached, my bones throbbed like tuning forks struck against stone. The pit opened wider, revealing a shape too vast to take in at once. It wasn't a body, not as I knew bodies. It was a coil, endless, twisting, layered with faces and mouths and scars that glowed red in the dark. Each curve of it shifted, slow and deliberate, grinding against itself like tectonic plates. Every movement sent a tremor through the ground, every tremor another beat of the chant. And at its center, a mouth. Not a human mouth, not an animal's, but a wound upon a wound, opening and closing in slow, wet gulps. Every time it opened, the chant swelled, as if the sound itself was drawn from that abyss. I knew then what the stadium was. What the chants had always been. Not support. Not passion. Not loyalty. Feeding. The lads weren't my friends. The crowd wasn't a crowd. The match wasn't a match. It was a ritual, ancient and endless. And I was no spectator. I was the next meal. The spiral path narrowed, guiding me closer to the mouth. The shadows closed in behind me, faceless, countless, pressing me forward. The bodies on the walls shrieked silently, their grins tearing wider. And as I neared the edge, I realized the worst truth of all. It wasn't forcing me. I was walking willingly. My body ached, my throat bled, but my steps fell steady, in rhythm, in time. The chant was mine as much as theirs. It had always been mine. And there was no stopping it now. The path ended without warning. One step it was beneath me, slick and pulsing, spiraling deeper into the dark. The next it was gone, dissolving underfoot, leaving only a thin ledge of living tissue, warm and trembling, hanging over an abyss. The chant had stopped sounding like voices. It was deeper now, a vibration that rose from the pit itself, a hum in my ribs and teeth, a low note that bent the space around me. I clutched my ears, but it didn't matter, the noise was inside my bones. Below, the mouth waited. It wasn't a thing you looked at, not fully. Each time I tried, my eyes slipped off its edges. It was too big, too wrong, like staring at an eclipse with bare eyes. It wasn't just a wound, it was a horizon. A circular horizon of slick black flesh, lined with ridges that moved like gills, teeth like jagged flags rising and falling, every motion revealing more darkness within. And that darkness breathed. When it inhaled, my chest hollowed, my knees buckled. When it exhaled, heat washed over me, metallic and sweet, carrying whispers that weren't in any language but that I still understood, promises, bargains, hunger. The shadows behind me closed in. They didn't touch me. They didn't have to. They only watched, their faces, or the suggestion of faces, rippling like cloth in wind. Each blink I saw something different. My mates, strangers, my own reflection twisted and grinning back. The bodies in the walls shuddered, their mouths stretching wider, silent screams or silent hymns. Scarves nodded like veins pulsed with red light. The whole place beat like a heart. And my name rose again. Not chanted, not spoken, felt. A pressure behind my eyes, a tug under my ribs. It dragged me forward, one slow step at a time, closer to the edge. My boots left smears of red where they touched the flesh. I tried to resist. My muscles locked, my nails dug into the living wall. For a moment I held myself there, shaking, teeth bared, a sob choking in my throat. I am not part of this, I thought. I am not, but the thought slid out of my head like water. In its place came the rhythm. My heart matched it. My breath matched it. My lips parted, the chant spilling out again without my consent. I wasn't resisting. I was waiting. Waiting for the signal. And then it came. A roar, not of the crowd, not of engines, not of anything human. A roar that had no source but the mouth itself, a sound so low and vast the walls shook, the ceiling dripped, the bodies convulsed. My vision went black around the edges. My knees buckled. My arms fell to my sides. The mouth opened wider. Beyond its teeth there wasn't darkness at all. There were stands. Floodlights. A pitch. I saw it clearly, Anfield or some version of it, packed with faces all staring down at me, chanting, scarves raised high. But it wasn't memory. It was now. They were above me and below me, inside and out. The stadium was the creature. The creature was the stadium. Every match, every chant, every terrace and away day, one endless mouth feeding on itself, folding reality into a loop. And I was at its center. A shape emerged in the mouth's glow, rising from the abyss like a shadow given mass. It had no form at first, just shifting limbs, scarves fluttering like wings, faces flickering across it like ghosts, Danny's grin, Marty's twitch, Reese's hollow eyes. Then my own face appeared. It smiled at me. The shadows behind me pressed closer. My boots left the ledge though I hadn't moved. The flesh beneath my feet undulated, tilting me forward. My arms reached out, not to stop the fall but to embrace it. I realized with sick clarity that this wasn't punishment. It wasn't even sacrifice. It was inheritance. The thing in the mouth wasn't going to eat me. It was going to wear me. I opened my mouth to scream, but only the chant came out. It had become my voice. My only voice. And as the edge crumbled, as I tipped forward into the abyss, the thing's arms opened, waiting. The edge gave way. For a moment, weightlessness. A sickening pause before the fall. My arms flailed, but there was no air to grab, no ground to brace against. The abyss swallowed me whole, and the roar of the crowd, the roar of the mouth, filled every corner of me. I didn't hit bottom. I didn't fall at all. I dissolved. My body stretched thin, every nerve pulled long until I was nothing but vibration. My skin split into strands of sound, my bones unraveled into rhythm, my blood bled into the chant. I wasn't screaming anymore. I was the scream. The mouth closed around me, teeth locking shut. But it wasn't consumption. It was communion. I felt them. All of them. The lads, the crowd, the bodies on the walls. Not as separate people but as threads in the same weave. Their thoughts trickled into me, broken and warped, yet familiar. Danny's laughter, Marty's fists raised, Reese's drunken songs, all dissolved, stretched, recycled into the same endless hymn. There was no they, no I, only we. And we sang. Every syllable rattled universes. Every beat turned the spiral another lap. I felt the pitch under my boots, the terraces under my feet, the scarves burning around my throat, and none of them were mine, not really. They belonged to all of us, and all of us belonged to the mouth. The creature wrapped itself around me, not with arms but with meaning. It filled my veins with memory that wasn't mine. I saw matches that never happened, riots in streets that didn't exist, chants in languages older than stone. I lived 1,000 Saturdays in seconds, each one feeding the same cycle, each one ending with the same roar. The roar that had no end. The roar that was the end. The roar that was me. For a flicker, a tiny gasp of self, I thought of escape. Of tearing myself loose, of clawing free from the spiral. I imagined myself back on the terrace, pint in hand, scarf tight, mates at my side, just a lad again. But the thought curdled instantly. Because that was the spiral. The terrace, the pint, the chance, it was never ordinary. It was never life. It was always this. The mouth was in it from the beginning. Every shout, every bruise, every Saturday was just another thread pulling me here. I hadn't stumbled into the ritual. I'd been walking it all my life. The truth gutted me. And yet, there was comfort too. The fear drained, replaced with something heavier, deeper. A belonging so vast it drowned out doubt. I didn't need my name anymore. Didn't need memory. Didn't need self. I was the chant. I was the scarf and the terrace and the roar. I was the mouth. And as the creature opened wider, as the stadium above bent inward to collapse into the abyss, I felt every voice align, every mask grin. Every hollow gaze lock on the same point, the next one. The next lad. The next fool who thought he was just here for football. The spiral turned again, and I turned with it, forever. When the mouth closed, I thought that was it, that it vanished into the abyss forever. But instead, the darkness cracked. A thin line of light split across my vision, widening, widening, until I found myself standing again. On the streets of Liverpool. Cold rain slicked the cobblestones, neon lights reflected in puddles. The smell of fried chips, cheap lager, exhaust fumes, it was all there, as ordinary as a Tuesday night. For a moment, relief surged through me. I was free. I was back. But the relief didn't last. Because the city was breathing. The street lamps pulsed faintly, flickering in rhythm with the beat it felt below. Windows along the terraces rose and fell, not from wind or air but as if the bricks themselves expanded and contracted like lungs. The gutters gurgled in time, spilling water in long, steady exhales. I turned a corner. The pub loomed ahead, our pub, where we always gathered before a match. Warm light spilled out, laughter rolled into the night. I staggered toward it, desperate for something familiar, something human. Inside, the lads stood shoulder to shoulder, pints raised, scarves around their necks. They looked normal at first, faces flushed, voices rowdy, eyes gleaming. But when they laughed, it wasn't laughter. It was chanting. The same chant, broken into bursts, echoing through the wood-paneled walls. And the walls themselves bent with it. The beams bowed inward, the ceiling sagged, the bar curved around them like ribs. The pub wasn't a pub. It was another mouth. I stumbled back into the street, gasping. People passed me, umbrellas bobbing, chatter filling the air. But their footsteps landed in perfect rhythm. Their words overlapped into the same chant, no matter the language, no matter the voice. A woman pushing a pram, a group of lads spilling from a taxi, an old fellow with his shopping bags, every single one moving, speaking, breathing in sync. The spiral was here too. I ran. Down Bold Street, past shuttered shops, through alleys slick with rain. My chest burned, my legs screamed, but I couldn't stop. Everywhere I turned, the city warped tighter. The streets curved where they never had before, looping back on themselves. The buildings leaned, bricks stretching into spirals, doorways opening like mouths. I knew then, there was no outside. The stadium wasn't a place. It was a shape, a pattern, a hunger. It lived in the stands, in the pubs, in the city itself. Maybe the whole world. I stopped in the middle of the road, panting, soaked. My reflection rippled in the puddle at my feet, but it wasn't mine. The face that stared back was grinning, hollow-eyed, chanting. I staggered back, screaming. My voice cracked, but the sound that came out wasn't a scream. It was the chant again, word for word, rhythm perfect. I clutched my throat, desperate to stop, but my lips moved without me. My reflection moved with me, in sync, until it stepped free of the puddle. Water rippled upward, spilling into the air, shaping itself into another me, scarved, grinning, chanting. Then another. And another. The street filled with them, my own face multiplied, marching toward me in endless rhythm. The chant roared louder, rattling windows, shattering glass, spilling across rooftops. The city shook, a vast spiral turning on itself, and I was its center. I backed against a wall, hands over my ears, eyes shut tight. But the chant was inside. The spiral was inside. I was never free. I was never meant to be. I pressed myself against the wet brick, eyes clamped shut, nails digging into my palms. The chant swallowed everything, the city, the night, even the rain. It was louder than thunder, older than stone, relentless. I thought if I just kept my eyes closed, if I just held still long enough, maybe it would pass. But nothing passed. The sound didn't come from outside anymore. It was in my chest, my veins, the marrow of my bones. Every heartbeat struck in rhythm, each breath timed to the endless roar. Even my thoughts weren't mine. Words rose and fell inside me, syllables shaping themselves before I could resist. We are one. We are many. We are the mouth. I forced my eyes open. The street was gone. Or maybe it had always been like this, and I was only now seeing it. The buildings leaned inward, forming a spiral around me, windows gaping like sockets, doors yawning like mouths. The road beneath me pulsed, slick and red, veins running through the tarmac. And all around, the reflections of me, hundreds, thousands, marched in unison, scarves fluttering like banners, faces grinning wide. Each one opened its mouth, and my voice came out. But not a scream. Not even words anymore. Just the chant. That endless, droning chant. I staggered forward, desperate to escape, though there was no direction that wasn't inward. Every turn folded back on itself, every alley curved like ribs into the spiral. My doppelgangers closed in, shoulder to shoulder, arms raised like terraces full of supporters. Their eyes were empty, yet full of fire. Their mouths stretched wider than mouths should. And I knew, with a terror so deep it almost broke me, that they weren't copies. They were me. Not versions. Not illusions. Every one of them was a piece of me I'd already lost. Every step I'd taken into the spiral had shed something: memory, thought, flesh, and those pieces had become bodies, faces, voices. I wasn't being followed. I was being reclaimed. The city's spiral wound tighter. The ground tilted, pulling me toward the center. And at the center, waiting, was the pitch. A football pitch, vast and glowing under floodlights that burned like suns. The lines weren't chalk but scars carved deep into flesh, seared into stone. The goals yawned like gateways, nets writhing like webs. And the stands, God, the stands, rose impossibly high, tier upon tier of shadows, scarves, and mouths. Every seat was filled, every eye fixed on me, every throat chanting in perfect unison. I fell to my knees. It wasn't a match. It never had been. It was ritual. The roar rose again, shaking the world. The pitch split open, grass tearing like paper, soil giving way to darkness. The spiral turned faster, dragging me forward on hands and knees. My skin left streaks of red on the ground. My reflection army marched closer, circling, closing. I tried to scream one last time. To shout no, to beg, to fight. But the sound that left me was the chant. Always the chant. The stands leaned inward, the city folding, the whole world collapsing into the spiral. And I understood, at last, that there was no escape. There never had been. The mouth wasn't a place. It wasn't even a thing. It was us. The lads. The crowd. The city. The game. It had always been waiting. I raised my scarf. Not by choice. My arm moved with the others, my voice blending into theirs. My last thought flickered, faint and pitiful, before it too was drowned, that I had only wanted to belong. And now I did. Forever. The spiral turned. The chant thundered. And the mouth smiled.